this degree of autonomy acceptable, which should be governed. And so Robert Adams, for instance, who teaches at UCLA, introduces a third alternative that he calls the theonomous will, a will that is a will that is governed by God, a theonomous will. Whether Kant really would allow that or intended it is a very good question. Was the law of God? So it may be a direction that we would have been happy with. In any case, his primary intention in talking of the autonomous will is to come back to the distinction between acting out of a voluntary respect for duty, as distinct from simply following inclinations and giving in to extraneous influences. So this is his categorical imperative. He does speak in connection with the respect for persons of what he calls a kingdom of ends. That is to say, if you treat people as ends rather than means, what you're doing is advocating that society should be a kingdom of ends. You know, a kingdom of people of equal worth, value. This is the basis for his emphasis on human rights. In the light of that, he proposed what he called the League of Nations. That's where Woodrow Wilson got the idea, straight from Immanuel Kant. He has a book, Kant does a little booklet called Perpetual Peace, in which he proposes this, that rational people, you see, acting out of goodwill, should contract together, contractual arrangement, contractarian approach. The respect for persons leads to the notion of kingdom of ends. And in his religion book that we'll be getting into, he talks of this kingdom of ends simply as the kingdom of God. You see, he sees this as the biblical notion of the kingdom of God. All right. Any comment, query? That's pretty straightforward, I think, once you see what he's up to. David? Yeah, you see, the only thing that is good without qualification is goodwill. It follows that the only thing that is really morally worthy is an act done out of a sense of duty. Not doing your duty because somebody's standing behind you with an arrest warrant. Not your duty because really you have an unthinking habit, you see. And certainly not avoiding your duty by being lured away by roommates who want to go out on the town for the night. Whatever. No, stick there and read Kant.
But you would go for, like, for example, Christian praying to God change my desires so that I would want to be...
Oh, he'd be very happy if your desires were changed, you see. His point is that acting out of desire is something which is deterministic. Now, let me go on to make that point. What he is arguing here in his analysis of the moral self, okay, in the analysis of the moral experience, what he's arguing is that the will is free when it acts rationally out of a sense of duty, guided by reason out of a sense of duty. On the other hand, if the will, rather than if the individual is not acting out of that kind of goodwill, but is simply doing what it wants to do, it's functioning at the empirical level where the cause-effect mechanisms of mechanistic science come into play. So in simply doing what you want to do, eating without thought of whether this is what you ought to be eating, for instance, responding thoughtlessly and breaking off what's got to be done, just warming it up. What you're doing is acting more like an animal than a rational human being, you see. So he's trying to maintain that if you live at the sensual level, pursuing desires, inclinations, emotions, feelings only, you see, you're not free. You're not acting as a human being. While the desires may not be bad, the activities may not be bad, he's concerned about the moral quality of the person. The only thing that is good without qualification is goodwill. Yeah. Oh, he's been criticized here. Sure, he was a Prussian. I don't know why that would be a criticism, but a lot of English writers talk about the Prussian. He was a bachelor. Yeah, the very disciplined bachelor. The neighbors set their clocks in the morning by the time that he walked down the street to the university. That sort of an individual. Underlying it, I think, is the feeling that, and I suspect this underlies your question, David, that there is something less than fully human about the notion of acting out of a sense of duty and ignoring desire. God-given desire. Perhaps redemptively transformed desire. Yes. Well, I think the thing to say in his defense is that he recognizes that we have a natural desire for happiness. He recognizes that this is a God-given desire for happiness. The problem is that in this life, those two don't come together. You see? There's too much going against us for them to come together, both in us and outside us, to automatically trust desires for happiness. And that's what feeds into what you see coming later in terms of the corollaries. Okay. Pete? Yeah, he's not saying we always do. He's very explicit that there are people who will fly in the face of their duty, act to the contrary, reject moral law. He's trying to get into his thinking something of what theology talks about in terms of depravity. Whether he does so sufficiently is the question. His background was Lutheran pietism, and Kierkegaard is quite critical of him in this regard. Not for being a Lutheran pietist, I mean, but for what Kierkegaard regards as a too optimistic view of human nature. Somebody else back there, yeah. Yeah, you see, that question implies that he's simply saying, do your duty. And so what do you do if you have conflicting duties? But he's not just saying, do your duty. He's saying, act out of a sense of duty. So his response to your question would be that in choosing between conflicting duties, you choose out of a sense of duty. You don't do the duty that you prefer to do. You say that you're more inclined to do. It's easier to do. You do the duty which, as a rational being, you decide it is your duty to do. Now, that does get into some problems. Well, you decide in terms of respect for persons. So that hypothetically he might say that if duty A conflicts with duty B and they're both duties to persons, which is more essential in respecting the person involved. In that way, I suppose he might argue in terms of lifeboat ethics. Know what I mean by lifeboat ethics? Extremities where there are two people who can be lost and only one can be saved. Yeah, he is in the sense, well, yeah, he's often taken to be, in the sense that he does not want to allow moral exceptions to moral rules. In that sense, he's an absolutist about lying, you see. There are no such things as justifiable lies. My initial reaction to your question was to pull out that favourite illustration about what would you do if you were in Amsterdam in 1942 and the Gestapo come knocking at the door looking for the Jewish girl you're hiding in your attic. And you say, would you tell a lie? Or what would you do? No, I think, at least according to that reading of Kant, he would say, no, you must never tell a lie. You see. Yeah, precisely. We had a Kant scholar here on campus on one of these visiting philosopher programs a few years ago, Christine Korsgaard, who was then at University of Chicago, who's now at Harvard. And she argued in one of her lectures that Kant was not an absolutist in that sense. That he would reconstruct the picture so that you're not lying. What you're doing is respecting persons and treating those who violate persons in a way that keeps the truth from them. Something of that sort. I think the point is, yeah, you think that's a subtle one, huh? There are 2 or 3 classic ways in which ethicists respond to your kind of question, what you do when duties conflict. One, you operate with a hierarchy of duties, and you decide which one ranks higher. Now, that's what I was implying when I said which is more essential in respect for persons. You see. The other is to introduce rules to govern exceptions to moral rules. Put that another way, you are qualifying the moral rule. So you mustn't lie is just a shorthand for a much longer moral rule with all sorts of qualifications, defining what you mean by a lie. You see. Just as some Old Testament scholars say about the commandment, thou shalt not kill. And then read in that context, there are all sorts of qualifications that are built into it. You just have to look in the context to see. It's not a blanket rule, it's a qualified rule. So it's difficult to exactly look Kant does, and that's how some Kant specialists earn their reputations, is arguing about how to interpret Kant that way. Yes, sir? Knowing what your sense of duty is? No. Well, then you don't have to worry about knowing it. If you're acting out of a sense of duty, you must know you have a sense of duty. No, you mean how you determine what is your duty? By the categorical imperative. That is the way in which you know what is your duty. Would you be acting on a maxim that could be universalized? Would you be acting out of respect for persons? Would you be acting out of an autonomous will? It's the way you know. It's the way you decide. No, it doesn't give you a whole list of rules. Well, you don't want a rule book for ethics. You've got to make moral decisions in cases where there are no rules anyway. That's what medical ethics today and bioethics is about. You see? No, moral thinking is about how most basic moral principles affect our decisions. Or if we're trying to formulate moral rules, we should follow how you formulate those moral rules. The answer is on the basis of the categorical imperative. Say that again. Exactly. On the basis of the categorical imperative. This here, the a priori principle is the categorical imperative. Come at that one other way. Some of you have seen me talk this way before, but I find it helpful to distinguish between 4 levels of ethical discussion. A particular case, an area rule, a rule that applies to an area of moral responsibility, like a rule against lying. Overall principles, that is to say, principles that apply to every kind of area of responsibility, to the entire moral life. And then the basis on which those principles rest, which would be a theological basis, or a philosophical basis of some sort, a physical basis. Okay? Now, in Kant's case, the principle is the categorical imperative. You see? The categorical imperative. He might have a rule about truth-telling, which is based on the categorical imperative. The lie is not respecting persons. I think I can fool you, deceive you, manipulate you by my lies. You think not respecting persons. So the rule is based on that, and that's applied to the case. So how do you know what's the right thing to do in a particular case? Well, normally we check the rules. You have certain moral rules of thumb. You have certain explicit biblical moral teachings. There are certain societal moral standards, professional code of ethics, whatever it might be. You see? But when you're trying to formulate such rules, or try to handle conflicts between moral obligations at the rules level, you see, then you go back to what the overall principle demands. Okay. I think there is another feature that feeds into ethical discussion, and that's what I call background beliefs, BBs, background beliefs. If you're dealing with questions in business ethics, then your underlying belief about the meaning and purpose of work, of economic activity, comes into play. If you're dealing with matters of medical ethics, then your belief about the purpose of medical care comes into play. And there's literature, for instance, that from a Christian point of view, about the attitude of the medical profession, that we have to extend human life at all costs to the patient. Not just economic cost, but cost of suffering. Anyway, they arguing that from a Christian point of view, death is something to be accepted, not endlessly denied. And that the preservation of life is not the highest end. It's not an argument for active euthanasia, but it is an argument against extraordinary means of extending life when, by all natural standards, life is drawing to a close. So background beliefs.
One question on the categories themselves. These a priori categories, are they as objective as the metaphysics?
Yeah, you see, I started today by talking of Kant as a moral realist.
Okay.
You see, the categorical imperative, don't call them categories, there's one categorical imperative, there's three ways of stating it. The categorical imperative is his way of distinguishing right from wrong. You see. Now, is he making up the distinction? No, this is his way of recognizing a distinction that's already there. You see, moral right and moral wrong are two very different things. How do we know which is which? By means of the categorical imperative.
It seems strange to me that he'd be a moral realist while in metaphysics he believes in the phenomenal.
But he told you he was going to be at the end of the first critique. Yeah, now read that last section in the first critique. You remember where he talks about belief, moral belief as distinct from doctrinal belief. Now why? Well, at this juncture, all he's doing is talking about moral experience. Where does moral experience occur? Within the mind, wrestling with moral obligation in relationship to desires and inclinations. In other words, moral experience, as such, is not experience of a space-time world at all. You see? And so your forms and categories of science and metaphysics don't impose themselves on our moral thinking. You see? So it is in our moral life, in the inner life of the human spirit, that you have an open door into the nature of reality. That's why it is that idealism and romanticism is a result of Kant. You see, the turn is a turn away from the observing the external world of science to the inner world of the self. That was his Copernican revolution, wasn't it? Yeah. So that Copernican revolution has very far-reaching implications. Remember when we talked about the effects of Kant in 19th century idealism, romanticism, all this? Well, you begin to see it here in terms of ethics. Kant is hardly a romanticist, but he's often called an ethical idealist. That is to say, one who describes the ultimate reality in ethical terms, in terms of right and wrong. An ethical idealist. So Kant's God is a moral deity.
Is it, if everyone has a APRI principle, isn't it also deterministic? Like more people would be like...
No. No, the fact that in examination, analysis of moral experience you uncover by the transcendental method, this categorical imperative, doesn't mean to say that everybody has to follow the principle. If there's freedom of will, you can turn your back on the principle. You see? And that's precisely what some people do. What was it in Milton's Paradise Lost that the devil said? Evil, be thou my good. See, that's the evil will. That's not good will, that's evil will. Now, if he were not an indeterminist, you see, if he didn't emphasize freedom of will, you'd be right, he would be a determinist. But the principle is not a principle that determines your decisions. The principle is a principle which reason can observe in guiding the will. You know? Yeah, well, hold the phone on that one, will you? So far, the only part of the response that we can have is that this kind of moral experience is independent of the forms and categories that apply to metaphysics. Okay, let's take, however, this next step to the corollaries. And you can see already how he handles the question of freedom. The freedom of the will is a corollary of moral duty. That is to say, if we say that morality consists of acting out of a sense of duty, then if morality doesn't make any sense, there must be the freedom to act out of a sense of duty, which means freedom of the will. So while he is not proving the freedom of the will, it is a corollary of his account of moral experience, of moral phenomenology. If he's right about this matter of duty, then it follows